As the son and his wife arrived, their tense expressions were palpable and their smiles strained. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Long time no see. Nice to meet you, George. And congratulations on your 24th wedding anniversary," they greeted, their voices tight with nerves. "I am Catherine. I am resilient and I endured years of abuse but found strength in protecting my son." "Welcome. I'm so glad you both could come and celebrate with us today," I responded cheerfully, trying to ease their tension. "Today I've gone all out preparing the meals since you both came all this way. Dad cooked, but I'm not used to it, so I'm not done with the preparations yet." While Bobby sat down, accepting George's kindness despite his puzzled expression, Grace headed to the kitchen where George was. As I wiped the table, I felt the lively atmosphere that comes with family being together. "Well, the food's ready now. Shall we toast?" I suggested with the biggest smile yet. George offered me a glass as he spoke. "I want Catherine, who has had it the toughest, to lead the toast." Touched by George's kindness, I took the glass with a pounding heart. I slowly raised my glass and took a deep breath. "May this happiness last for—" Mid-sentence, Grace suddenly grabbed my hand forcefully and ran towards the entrance. "Run now!" she exclaimed urgently. Confused, I had no choice but to follow her due to her desperate strength. After we had left the house and walked for a while, we entered a cafe that came into view. Struggling to keep up with Grace, I finally stopped and caught my breath, relieved. "I'm sorry for the suddenness, but this was the only way," Grace said, shaking and turning pale as she explained the situation. "George, congratulations on your long teaching career," I addressed my husband George, who is 5 years my senior, with words of appreciation. Having served as a high school teacher for over 30 years, George retired this spring. "Yeah, as usual," George responded indifferently, relieved that he had replied. Suddenly, a dusty old photograph on the desk in my room caught my eye. It was a cherished shot from our wedding, both of us looking radiant. I couldn't help but sigh. If only we could go back to those days. Back then, George was kind. He would express his gratitude and appreciation daily, eagerly ate the meals I cooked, always accompanied me on shopping trips, carried the small bags, and made sure to check on my well-being. However, as our marriage progressed, he gradually began to comment on my household chores. At first, it was minor things like making the omelet sweeter or vacuuming daily, things he never mentioned in our early days. I was puzzled but pleased to think that George was finally opening up, and I happily complied. However, as time passed, his criticisms increased. When our son Bobby started elementary school, any slight displeasure would lead to harsh reprimands, and George was just as strict with Bobby. "If you have time to play, study. You're a boy, don't cry no matter what happens," he demanded. High academic performance from Bobby, who was still in elementary school, would scold him severely if he wasn't at the top of his class. This invisible violence gradually took its toll on us. George continued his reprimands, remaining mostly indifferent to household matters. When Bobby reached middle school, George's violence was no longer just verbal. "Why can't you score better?" Bobby had made just one mistake in a 5-subject test. Without trying to hide his anger, George furiously tore up the test papers on the desk. "Being at the top of the class is quite impressive, isn't it? It has to be perfect. Why did you only get this one wrong?" Hesitantly, I wanted to acknowledge Bobby's hard work and spoke up. "Everyone makes mistakes. It's because you coddle him like that. I've been embarrassed because of you." George raised his voice and finally raised his hand to me. All I could do was endure until George calmed down. I'm so sorry," I kept apologizing, telling myself it was just until George calmed down. If this appeased George, he wouldn't lash out at Bobby. To protect Bobby, I gritted my teeth over and over. Even when Bobby became a high school student, George didn't change. "What are you doing? Aren't you upset Bobby lost today?" After Bobby, who had joined the soccer team, lost a game, I was berated. It was Bobby's first game, and he was picked as a freshman. That, in itself, was wonderful. "Don't you get the point of being on the team if you lose like that?" George slapped my left cheek hard. Holding my stinging cheek, I desperately tried to prevent George's anger from turning toward Bobby. The other team was the top national contender, and Bobby managed to score 2 goals against them. If he can score 2, he could have scored 3. Then he slapped my right cheek hard. "Tell him I won't tolerate another disgraceful performance next time." George seemed satisfied after hitting both my cheeks and left with a parting shot. I will not let him lay a hand on Bobby. While cooling my cheeks with ice, I kept reassuring myself. Every time Bobby's grades or test results came out, George would become violent toward me. "Mom, your face!" Bobby came running to me, about to cry. "It'll heal quickly. Don't worry, Bobby." I tried to force a smile, but my swollen cheeks wouldn't cooperate. "It's my fault, isn't it?" "No, it's not, Bobby. You've done nothing wrong. If only I had better grades." "Please, Mom, stop covering for me." His plea pained my heart. Protecting their child is a parent's job, but I don't want to see you hurt anymore because of me. Clutching his fists, Bobby strained to speak. "If Dad ever hits you and you end up all bruised, I won't be able to handle high school." That might be true, but life is only once. I want Bobby to fully enjoy his youth in high school. I gently touched Bobby's shoulder and tried to explain. "Mom, your life is only once too. I'm fine. Besides, Dad's attitude is just for now. He'll surely return to the kind father he once was." I smiled gently as I looked into his eyes. "I'll try even harder not to cause any trouble." Sensing my unyielding stance, Bobby spoke weakly. "Just enjoy being yourself, Bobby. Leave Dad to me, please." He looked me in the eyes and nodded firmly. Then Bobby enjoyed his high school life and quickly became a college applicant. Bobby seemed to be choosing his college based on its proximity to home and worried about me. "Don't worry about Dad, but what about you?" "I'll stay here and live with Dad." Bobby looked at the marks on my arm with a face like he had swallowed a bitter bug. "Really? Must you?" "Yes, and you know I'm not strong, right? Too much change might be too much for me." I had always tended to get sick when traveling. "Okay," reluctantly Bobby conceded. Bobby worked hard and successfully got into his desired university, a considerable distance away requiring a railroad train journey. George had always been critical of Bobby, but since the university was prestigious, he seemed unusually satisfied. "Take care, Mom. I'll do my best." Bobby, on the verge of tears, gripped my hand and then left for his new life. After Bobby moved to college, the physical violence from George subsided, but the scolding continued. "Catching a cold again? Are you faking it? Don't roam around in front of me dressed so sloppily." While I was often criticized about my health and appearance, it was better than being hit. My joy during those days was hearing from Bobby. He talked about trivial things like the seasons or his town, but I could always tell he was worried about me. "This year, the watermelons are really good and so sweet. I wish you could come and try some. That would be nice if I'm feeling well. I'd love to visit. The air is fresh, too. I think it would be a comfortable environment for you. Thanks for worrying about me." With Bobby keeping in touch regularly, I felt less lonely and could endure George's scoldings. This life continued for over 4 years, and Bobby graduated from college and married a local girl, Grace. "My wife said she'd love to live with you when I told her about you." That was a typical message from Bobby. Grace, now Bobby's wife, was an alive and cheerful woman, as I had often heard. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your newlywed life, so I'll just gratefully accept the food." After replying to Bobby, I quietly exhaled. I still couldn't let go of the faint hope that one day George would return to being the kind husband he once was, so I had no intention of going to live with Bobby. "It's okay, it'll surely be okay," I muttered like a mantra, enduring George's scolding. "Hey, where did you put my socks?" My mantra did not work, and George's harsh words fell on me relentlessly every day. "The socks are right there, not these. Today is important. Do you think I can go out in these wrinkled socks?" George complained about socks that had only been used 2 or 3 times. "But these are the newest socks we have." "Really, you're useless. It's basic manners to iron the socks daily so they don't wrinkle. If it's the same tomorrow, I won't let it go." Leaving behind these unkind words, George left the house. Even though I knew he wouldn't look back, I hurriedly called out a goodbye. He's counting on me, so I have to respond. Ignoring the pain in my heart, I busied myself with household chores. I continued to endure George's unreasonable demands alone, and now years have passed. Upon his retirement, George seemed a bit calmer. It would be a lie to say I felt no anxiety about spending more time with him in the future. Still, I forced myself to see kindness in his actions and was disgusted with myself for still searching for the man he once was. Unable to let go of my anxiety and faint hope, I found it hard to approach the living room where George spent his days. I watched TV only when he was in the room. A dish George might like was featured on the program. Deciding what to make for dinner that evening, I turned off the TV and prepared to go shopping, dressing warmly since the forecast said the high would only be 41 F even though it was April. Hey, pause for a moment. Would you care to support us? Like this video and subscribe for more. Now let's dive back into the story. Just as I was about to leave the house, as usual, George called out from behind, "Wait a minute, I'll come with you to carry the bags." Surprised by his unexpected offer, I almost dropped my bag. "It would be cold to walk. I'll take the car out." Watching George quickly get ready, I pinched the back of my hand to see if I was dreaming. I pinched the back of my hand to keep it from being noticed, but it probably hurt more than if I had pinched my cheek. Come to think of it, I hadn't received a single insult today. "All right, let's go then." As he urged me on, I got into the car. Then George said something even more surprising. "You can rely on me, you know." Unable to believe he was the same person as the day before, I reflexively replied, "Yes." What had happened to him? George, perhaps noticing I shivered from the cold, quietly turned on the heater. "Thank you." George glanced at me and smiled. It had been decades since I last saw George smile. It had been so long that I was shocked and instinctively looked away. 5 minutes into the car ride, George spoke again. "I'm sorry, I've been under a lot of stress from work and I've been taking it out at home." I see. Given his job as a teacher, he must have faced considerable pressure from many students and their parents. I'm a flawed person. Instead of being supportive, I've hurt the family I care about, which is the worst. Seeing George's remorseful expression, tears naturally started flowing from my eyes. My kind husband, whom I had always believed in, had returned. Thank you for working so hard for us. I've always known and believed you're a kind person. I'm lucky to have such a great wife. Embarrassed, George smiled, and I found myself smiling too. Thank you. Let's keep it up from now on. Of course. From that day, George acted as if he was trying to make up for lost time. I don't know if it's enough to pay you, but I want to be there for you, Catherine, George said with a serious look, and he took the initiative to care for my health and do the cooking. You're already helping a lot. Thank you so much. I felt grateful that I had kept my faith in him. As the seasons changed, it was around the time when the osmanthus fragranced the air again. This year, Bobby and his wife, Grace, had planned to come over to celebrate our silver wedding anniversary. I wonder if it's okay for Grace to meet Dad. Up until just before their visit, Bobby was worried about George's behavior. It's fine. He doesn't say harsh things to me anymore, and he's very kind, really. Although I had visited Bobby and Grace by myself before, this was the first time they would come to our house. If you're that worried, I'll talk to Dad. With that, Bobby would feel differently after hearing George's words. Hello, is that Bobby? I handed the phone to George, who exchanged greetings, albeit awkwardly. Bobby, I'm sorry. I've been on edge because of work stress, and I've been too hard on both your mom and you. I couldn't see Bobby's face on the other end of the phone, but I could tell from George's demeanor that some of the tension had eased. After a few more minutes of conversation, George hung up, satisfied. They're coming all the way here, so I want to entertain them myself, George said. The relationship between George and Bobby had never been good, to put it mildly. However, I was genuinely happy that he was trying to make amends. I'm thinking of doing a home party and I'll cook everything myself. I've been a burden for so long, I want you to relax, George suggested. That sounds wonderful. Bobby and Grace will be delighted, I replied, filled with gratitude and emotion from his proposal. If that's the case, I'll gladly take you up on your offer. Sure, leave it to me. Excitedly, I began to think about what else I could do for Bobby and his wife's visit. Then I'll do the cleaning. I'll be using the kitchen, so I'll handle that. Could you take care of the cleaning outside the kitchen? I understood, and thus we cooperated in preparing to welcome Bobby and his wife. On the day they arrived, Bobby and his wife's expressions were tense and their smiles were strained. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. It's been a while. Nice to meet you, George, and congratulations on your 24th wedding anniversary. Welcome. I'm so glad you both could come and celebrate with us today, I cheerfully responded, trying to ease their tension. Bobby has grown up, catching such a beautiful wife. George also casually spoke to Bobby. Dad seemed unsettled by his father's unusual gentleness. Today, I've gone all out preparing the meal since you both came all this way. Dad cooked, but I'm not used to it, so I'm not done with the preparations yet. George shrugged, showing his bandaged left hand, hinting at how many times he had cut himself. Thank you, just knowing you tried means a lot. Bobby sat down, accepting George's kindness despite being puzzled. Grace headed to the kitchen where George was. If it's still in progress, I'd be happy to help out if you don't mind. As I wiped the table, I felt the lively atmosphere that comes with the family being together. Grace's active involvement with George naturally brought a smile to Bobby's face. Seeing this, I felt immensely happy. Well, the food's ready now. Shall we toast? With the biggest smile yet, George offered me a glass as he spoke. I want Catherine, who has had it the toughest, to lead the toast. Touched by George's kindness, I took the glass with a pounding heart. I slowly raised my glass and took a deep breath. May this happiness last for... Mid-sentence, Grace suddenly grabbed my hand forcefully and ran towards the entrance. Confused, I had no choice but to follow her due to her desperate strength. After we had left the house and walked for a while, we entered a cafe that came into view. Struggling to keep up with Grace, I finally stopped and caught my breath, relieved. I'm sorry for the suddenness, but I had no other choice. Grace was trembling and turned pale as she explained the situation. What? As she spoke, I felt the color drain from my face. Grace said that when she was preparing the drinks, she tried to carry a glass, and George strongly objected. I've been watching his actions secretly so he wouldn't notice me. George, looking around nervously, poured a drink into one of the glasses and then added something finely chopped. It was aconite. Aconite? I hike as a hobby and the mountains can be quite dangerous, she explained, rubbing her arms with both hands. There are many dangerous plants, things that shouldn't be eaten, and I've researched the mountain flora extensively, so I recognized it immediately, even though I've never seen aconite. I knew it was poisonous. The beautiful purple substance in the glass looked stylish. I had no idea it was poison. Shaking with shock, my thoughts froze from the sheer horror of the revelation. It was Bobby's phone call that snapped me back to reality. Mom, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. Are you safe? Bobby sighed, telling me what had happened at home. It seems Dad didn't expect you to leave. He was in a daze for a while. It seems he was stunned and hadn't noticed you nearby when I escaped. Then suddenly he realized what happened and hurried out of the house, so he might be looking for you. The cafe we were in was nestled in a complex network of alleys and wouldn't be easy to find. But I couldn't shake my anxiety. However, don't worry. I've installed a location tracking app on Dad's phone. Bobby had given us mobile phones when he moved out so we could contact him immediately. I never thought the tracking app would come in handy like this. Bobby chuckled bitterly, seemingly struggling to contain his anger at what his father had attempted. Also, I was able to check his computer, Bobby said. Grace had asked him to check if there was any history of obtaining aconite. Since I don't use a computer, George probably let his guard down. Bobby found that the computer wasn't even locked, and on George's computer was a purchase history for aconite and messages from a woman George was involved with, who was plotting to kill me for insurance money. The reason Dad suddenly became nice was probably to let your guard down. Bobby's murmur dissolved into the air over the phone. After hearing everything, I felt as if I had been slapped awake. That George could, like a life flashing before my eyes, I revisited his past behavior. Indeed, since Bobby had left home, the violence had stopped. Back then, the sensation of violence had lulled me into a false sense of security, and I hadn't considered other possibilities. By that time, he had already been involved with another woman, and when he started being kind to me, he must have already planned everything. It was fortunate that Bobby and Grace came to celebrate, and that Grace knew about aconite, because if I had been alone, reflecting on it, there were many unnatural aspects. Even in preparation for our silver wedding anniversary, George had taken complete control of the kitchen. It was all to carry out his plan. Thinking of the worst, I got goosebumps all over my body. Bobby, thank you. I'm going to the police, okay? It looks like Dad is headed somewhere completely different. That's right. Now's our only chance. And so Grace and I decided to go to the police to report everything. Whatever happens, I will protect you, Catherine. Grace, you are so reliable. Encouraged by her strangely. My mind felt at ease. Grace's inherent cheerfulness lightened the atmosphere. Afterward, my divorce from George was finalized without incident. When the three of us returned home, although tired from the ordeal, there was a sense of relief in our expressions as we looked at each other. "I've arranged with a lawyer to get alimony from him. Thank you for everything." By that point, I had no more sympathy for George. Rather, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Moreover, having been mentally affected by years of George's abuse and violence, I was regularly visiting the hospital for checkups, which led to the police getting involved with him. With Bobby's help, we quickly located George, and the alimony was paid out of his pension. "I'm really in your debt. It seems his mistress got what she deserved too." The woman who had conspired with George was quickly apprehended thanks to the information found on his computer. "It looks like I can live without fear now." My heart was shredded by the betrayal of George, who had supported me for so many years. Yet, trying not to worry them, I forced a smile. Catherine, if you're okay with it, would you like to live with us?" "That's a kind offer, but I'll be fine on my own. If my frail health were to cause trouble for Grace, I wouldn't want to burden her." The last thing I wanted was to be a burden on my son and his wife. "We want to protect Catherine, who once selflessly protected Bobby," Grace said and then hugged me tightly. Grace in front of me, Bobby with a gentle expression, nodded in agreement. "Thank you. It would be reassuring to have both of you by my side always." With that, I moved in with Bobby and Grace and started a new life. My only concern had been my health, but since moving, I felt unexpectedly revitalized. Thanks to that, I've been able to do things and visit places I had previously avoided, making every day feel fresh. Today, I woke up with the sunrise, opened the window to breathe in the outside air, and felt enveloped by the humid air typical of summer. After preparing breakfast, the three of us gathered around the dining table. As we finished saying grace, I grabbed the mayonnaise. "Mayonnaise goes on fried eggs," I said firmly to Grace, who was about to put sauce on hers. "No, Catherine, it has to be sauce." Even over such trivial matters, we could speak our minds naturally, and I felt like I had finally grasped true happiness. "Both of you, eat up quick or we won't be able to go anywhere." Bobby said this, almost like he was soothing children. "Where are you taking us today?" "Let's go to the dairy farm and get some ice cream. I'm excited. I need to make sure I'm fully prepared for the sun." Through these interactions with them, I felt the true sense of family and love I had finally obtained, and I resolved to keep working together. "May this happiness last forever." I silently recited the words I couldn't say that day, feeling my heart dance with joy. After experiencing the full journey of our story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How did the story resonate with you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed. Thank you for watching and see you in the next story.